Good evening and welcome to the Laughing Monkey Music Show. We have Andy. Andy is the lead singer of one of my favorite bands, OMD. How are you?
I'm great, Sean. How are you?
I'm awesome. I'm glad we could do this. I've been excited to talk to you. I've been a fan for a long time. And what's interesting is for me to say, give you a little heading, I heard you obviously the popular, your big single back then, because at the time we didn't have the internet and all kinds of things. And a lot of my friends, we were into like rock and punk and metal. But then this song comes creeping along. If you leave and the voice and the melody, and then I got my hands on a tape, and it's something like architecture, and then I'm like, oh, what's this? And then as time goes on, over the years, I mean, it's just I love the band has just grown. I want to talk about your new album.
Okay.
It is fantastic. So the new album, Bauhaus Staircase. Let's start with the title because there's always a Bauhaus influence in the art and the of you guys. You guys have always had that kind of structure, taste. There we go. It's fun. I mean, all your albums have always had that consistent theme to it, for the most part.
For me, music was a hobby, and I was going to go to art college and do a degree, and I took a gap year and I started Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark with Paul, although we'd been writing together for
Yeah.
like three years previously. So the arts and the visual arts for me was always important. That's why we were so blessed to work with an amazing artist like Peter Saville, who did our early sleeves.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's no surprise that I keep going back to that well for inspiration and for education. And in particular, I was a real mid 20th century art lover. So
Okay.
I love that period of time. And of course, if you like sort of mid 20th century modern, then you've got to love Bauhaus. You've got to know about Bauhaus. And so I love Bauhaus. There's a great painting by one of the teachers and a great artist called Oscar Schlemmer called Bauhaus Staircase.
Yeah.
And I love that painting. Also, Schlemmer created these amazing costumes for the triadic ballet. And even now, over 100 years later, it's still the costumes and the ballet still look unbelievably.
I'm gonna have to look up after we talk today now.
Yeah, triadic ballet. Look it up. The costume. You can actually go if you want to go to Stuttgart. The costumes, the original costumes, are all still in the art museum there. Amazing. I often start songs quite soft or in a lower register, and then at some point I will skip up the octave, and you hit this particular resonance, which really it makes it sound like I really mean it. It's kind of quite plaintive.
Yep.
So yeah, so you noticed that. I mean, it was never conscious. It's just something I did because it felt right. But so going back to Bauhaus Staircase, and I'll try and keep it short. Bauhaus was closed in 1933. It was an art school, and it was actually quite practical. It was basically applied art. It wasn't completely kind of like pie in the sky art. But the Nazis closed it in 1933. Now, spin forward 90 years, and we're all in lockdown. And suddenly we all realize that when you're not allowed to go to gigs and you're not allowed to go to art galleries and museums and theatres, that you miss that interaction with live creativity. But secondly, also, and I don't know what it was like in your country, but everybody was furloughed except for people in the creative forming industries, theatres, singers, road crew, ballet. Nobody got money from the government.
Yep.
And they even put a poster out which had a ballet dancer on it saying, today she's a ballet dancer, but next year she could be an IT expert, which basically told you what the government thought about creative art. And yes, we all need to be safe. We all need to be well. We all need our mouths feeding, but particularly in difficult times, we need our souls feeding. So Bauhaus seemed to resonate with me during COVID, and I was locked in this room. I had fuck all else to do, so I just got down to writing this album. But we had to do a charity gig for our crew because they were getting no money.
Right.
My son is in a band, and his band split up during COVID. It was very difficult for young adults in particular, I think. So yeah, but I mean, amazingly, we're coming up to 5 years now since the first lockdowns, and yeah, it was. You look back now and you almost wonder if it really happened.
But this album though does not lack in vibrant energy. I mean, and I have people to show that I really get behind. I don't never just shine on. So I really love this album, and it's But you guys have always done that. Your last album, Punishment of Luxury, another banger. I mean, you guys have always, even when you did your stuff, when you guys kind of started to go your own certain way, and the album started, you were kind of like leading the band. It was still good stuff. It was just a little different because it was a different input. I still loved it. I mean, I do think that Walking and Milky Way is like one of the best songs you've ever done.
Thank you.
I think, I don't know, it should have been huge, especially that time period with that music. It fit in.
The dilemma was that came out in '96, I think, and I was an old man then of 37, and
Oh, to be 37 again.
yeah, I know. So do I. I wish, but you know, Radio One, which was the primary young pop radio station at the time, refused to play us because they didn't think we've hit their target demographic audience.
Okay.
Radio One wouldn't play it, therefore Woolworths wouldn't stock it. And in the UK, right up until when they still used to sell vinyl, 7-inch singles, like 50% of the total sales of all singles were sold through Woolworths, mostly on a Saturday morning. So I was basically fighting the chart with both hands tied behind my back. I got to number 17, and basically that frustration made me decide that I was banging my head against a brick wall.
I had read that. I mean, it's a shame because you probably did. I agree. I think it was probably one of the pinnacles, especially at that time, of all the other stuff you've put together, showing into your song.
Milky Way is a great song. I'm very proud of it.
And I think I'm sorry that it was the one that kind of turned you off. Obviously, it evolved into other things, and we keep talking. But it's a shame. That should have been more of a success story at the time for you, like a resurgence, because to me that was like a home run. I mean, and I'm also surprised that there was actually a Woolworth still around. Store, because that's a old store.
they all went belly up not long afterwards, and it serves them right for not stocking.
I think it's because of the single myself, but I can't prove it. That they didn't release it.
Yeah, but I think that no, I mean you touched on the fact that we made music after the band reformed, and it was very important for us to have quality control. The one thing we said was, we don't have to do this now. We're not on the treadmill. We don't have to make an album to keep ourselves afloat, because we're not running a big business now. This is our small handcrafted business now. And the great thing was that if we allow ourselves enough time and editorial control, you can go back to things and go, yes, it's working, or no, it's not quite working, I need to fix it. Unfortunately, back in the late 80s and the mid 90s, I was under so much pressure financially to keep the boat afloat. Well, Paul the same back in the 80s. That, I mean, because we signed a deal when we were 19 years old. Was so.
Did you even have a lawyer? Did you have a lawyer back then?
We had a lawyer who apologized to me years later for allowing us to sign this nearly criminal deal. The royalties were so low. The record company were giving with one hand and taking back with 5 hands, that despite all of the millions of records we sold in the 80s, we got to the end of the 80s and we owed the record company £1 million. And so every year we'd come back off tour, trying to break the world, trying to break America. We always joke that we tried to break America and it broke us. But because we'd signed this terrible deal, we had to rush back into the studio, and literally, how long have we got? 8 weeks, right? Well, the first 10 things we write is the album, good, bad, or ugly. And by contrast, for example, Depeche Mode, when they were selling millions of records, they were on a 50-50 after costs deal. So they made millions and millions because
they were rare, though. That was rare, though. All the good bands were.
Well, it was mute. Daniel Miller gave these bands really, really great deals. So they sold records. Once they paid the bills, they were getting 50%, whereas we were on like 8. One thing that's changed now is that touring used to lose money for us. Now it makes money. About 9-10 years ago, touring finally earned me more than my royalties. The most important thing is we have time, and we will not release anything unless we think it's ready to go.
Right.
And also, as Paul likes to say, we don't release a new album because our manager says you need a new logo for the tour T-shirt. You know, it's like, no, there's a new album because we have written a new album which we think is really worth listening to. And I mean, when I listen to, you know, not just the journalists, but I mean, mainly, you know, our fans, who a lot, many of whom have
Yeah.
been with us since '78, when they say that Punishment of Luxury um, and and Bauhaus Staircase
Mhm.
are in their top 5 OMD albums of all time. They're
Yeah, I can
comparing
agree with
them to
that.
Architecture and Morality and Dazzle Ships when
Yep.
back in the early 80s.
Yep.
It makes me realize that we, you know, yeah, we're doing the right thing. I trust our judgment.
I think that's true. I think I agree with all those. And I do think that Dazzle Ship is a good album. I think it's always hit or miss with fans though. Like I like it, but some fans will go, I like it, but it's not architecture. You know what I mean? Because it's just a little bit different. And
Oh, I
that's what I
mean,
like about a band. I like that when a band can take a left turn. You know?
at the time, Dazzle Ships nearly killed our career,
Yeah, I
but
know. I remember reading about that.
everybody looks back at it now. Well, some people look back at it now and go, but it was so amazing. That so many other musicians I meet go, oh my God, you know, I heard If You Leave, but then I heard Dazzle Ships and I went, I didn't know these guys did that kind of stuff. Wow.
I'm same thing, honestly. So I know at some point it seems like the naughty word was if you leave, I'll you're a pop band. But looking back at your whole history, you can see the continuity, the collectivity of all your songs having a certain string or wire going through them that kind of connect them. You're just a good pop song. I mean, you write a good song, and I just think it's what. How do you do with it?
Yeah.
It's just
I mean,
it's you
yeah,
and Paul.
thank you very much. We have been blessed that very often we have quite an idiosyncratic, quite an esoteric, quite an artistic idea, you know, or almost a conceptual notion of something particularly me. I like to write about things that are not normally what people write about. You know, oil refineries and telephone boxes and airplanes that drop atom bombs and Bauhaus staircase paintings and, you know, kleptocracy and Anthropocene, and these things
Who
motivate
puts
me.
that in a song title? When that came out, I was like, I can't even say that word. I go, you are a madman. That is so awesome. I love that. I'm like, it's a good song too.
But the thing is, it doesn't matter for me. It doesn't matter how great the idea is, the concept, if it's not wrapped in a piece of music that bears repeated listening. Because
Mm-hmm.
I love conceptual ideas, I love conceptual art, and I like conceptual music. But sometimes you go like, well, you know, it's different, yeah, because they did this and they did that and they did that and they added the weird noises, and then you go, yeah, okay, right, I heard it, I get it, yeah. Do you want to listen to it again? Hell no. You know,
Right.
I heard the concept. I don't want to listen to the music again because it wasn't musical. And that, I think, has always been the thing we've tried to do, even on Dazzle Ships, which kind of freaked people out. It has a musicality. It was
Mm-hmm.
just, we kind of presented the bare bones of the concepts. They didn't have quite so much sugar coating on them, but it's still very musical.
It is. It was brave at the time, and I think it gave management a heart attack and gave you guys some creative control. And and looking back, it's important to see how you guys survived it. But I do think you guys were put in a weird position with it, trying to be a creative band and then creating your own sound and then being part of a generation. I mean, the bands you used to play with is just a who's that all went on to do their own creative things. I mean, it was such a rich group of people. Um, People don't know there's actually a great documentary that they put out when they got back together again. That really gives a lot of depth history. But one of the things that I've always thought was great was like when you write a song to me, like I said, if you leave, I heard, and then of course from there, first thing it was no look great gay, and then I heard that, and then what it was about, I was like, oh my god, this is the best thing ever. Like the happy song, but it's not a happy concept. This is
Mhm.
brilliant. But that's what I was getting out of heavy metal songs. I'm like, oh, this whole pop thing, these keyboards, the synth. I think I like synth. Like it brought me in deeper. That's got the hook. If you leave a good melody, it's a good song. But
Mhm.
the hooks and no gay and songs like that are what are the meat and potatoes.
Yeah, I mean, you know, thank you again. You've been very complimentary. Do you want to start doing our PR? But, no, I mean, again, you know, both Paul and I are geeks. Um, he was into model trains and I was into model aeroplanes. Now, if you're into aeroplanes, at some point, you know, I'm also particularly was fascinated by Second World War airplanes. I mean, the war only ended 14 years before I was born, so it was, you know,
Yeah,
it's
still
in
there.
everybody's memory. and you could still see lots of Liverpool that hadn't been rebuilt from being bombed. But you come to Enola Gay, which is the most important aeroplane in the world, really, in many ways, because it's the plane that dropped the atom bomb that
Yeah.
brought about the end of the Second World War. Now, the other thing about it is, it's a strange thing to sing about.
Yeah.
It's a strange thing to name a plane after your mother and then go and drop
That's the
bomb.
biggest. That's like that could be like a college course to talk about that concept right there.
Mm-hmm.
Life and death, the time period, someone you love. It's like there's so much involved in that, doing that.
Well, until the day he died, the pilot, Paul Tibbets, believed he'd done the right thing. And the argument goes that, without the dropping of the atom bombs, American troops would have had to invade the home islands, and the Americans would have lost over 1 million, and the Japanese were going to fight to the death. Right. They would have lost even more millions. So actually, by killing 150,000 people, he may have saved 5 million.
Absolutely.
Discuss. I mean, talk about a moral question, a moral dilemma. Now, I'm fascinated by warfare, not because I think it's beautiful and exciting, but because it's this amazing moral dilemma. In times of peace, you're not allowed to do it. In times of war, you go over there and kill as many of those people as you can, and we'll give you a medal for it.
But it's about the numbers. Bigger society for small society.
In warfare, that's how you do it.
But to put a sentimental name of your mother attached to a bomb that kills people, that's the part where I'd be like, discuss.
Well, I got criticism for taking the bitter medicine and wrapping it in a sugar-coated melody, and people went, well, how can you write such a happy song about such a subject? And I used to say, in my defense, it's not as weird as naming the airplane after your mother and dropping atom bombs.
But I think in the long run, now look what you did. You got people talking about it still. All these years later, that you're talking about it. You know what I mean? It's important, and it's still relevant now. All the wars. I mean, where is that? I mean, so regardless of what people say, it's a good song too. It's a catchy song too.
We'll all be wondering about these moral dilemmas when Trump and Musk start World War III.
It's a matter of things are a matter of time. I do want to say, I heard a rumor, and I don't know, someone saying line, is this gonna be your last album? You said that. Is that true or not?
I don't feel, personally speaking, I don't feel that I've got another one in me.
Okay.
I don't know if I want to sit in this room and mine my heart and my head and my soul for several years to come up with sufficient quality. Paul now lives in the south of France. He has a daughter who's going to be 4 in a couple of months.
Oh wow!
So he's got a new wife, a lovely house in the south of France. I don't think he wants to go into his studio that often and do any mixing. So
until his kid starts getting older, he's going to want to get out of the house. He's going to be like, "We need to do an album."
we will see. No, I mean, it doesn't mean it's the end of the band.
I know. I'm just joking with you about that part.
I think there are projects that we can do that won't require us to be quite so deeply immersed. And also for me as well, especially because Paul was busy, buying chateaus in the south of France and having babies. It fell to me to do the majority of the work, and it was quite difficult. It was quite difficult trying to get this thing moved forward. I felt like I was pushing the project with Paul sitting on top of it on the rock up the hill, So it was. He knows I think that, so it's not new. He'll say it's not true, but it was. So I mean, we still love touring. We there's a couple of ideas. My computer is just down here. This is my programming room. I'm facing my screen to my speaker, so you can see them. But there's my microphone. But no, my computer down here, it's got a couple of files in it that are not finished yet, that are not being released. So that's all I'm going to say.
What I'm saying is, first as an artist, I respect that you don't want to do anymore. I'm not that guy's like, we need them out, because sometimes it doesn't amount to the deals, the finances, the time. I get all that, so it's not about that. I heard it. I like to put things out there when there's a visual of the artist saying, here's exactly what I'm saying to the fans. I think that's, first off, that's the most important thing. I hate clickbait, So to me, it's important to fans. But, and the second thing though, this album was so good, and you're such a creative person. Curious what the Wellspring was feeling like. Like, hey, you don't want to put a subpar album out if you don't have it in you. You don't want to just dial it in.
All right, well, listen, let me leave you with a couple of little, well, we're not finishing yet, but let me
but
sprinkle a couple of little cookies in here. I have a file in my computer called Requiem, which is like slow piano based kind of funeral marches. And I really fancy a really dark gothic album like that, whether it'll be OMD or me or whatever, I don't know. I've also got another file in there, which has got about 8 songs in it, which I've written over the last 30 years, which just didn't seem to fit the OMD genre. And I fancy doing that as
Okay.
OMD,
That's
OMD,
exciting.
OMD with our friends and get other people to come in and
Yeah.
sing and play with us. I still need to get Billy Gibbons to play guitar on one of our songs because I need that ZZ Top guitar solo. And you know, if you're aware of the ZZ Top connection,
I am, but
funny, very funny. Most people can't believe it. Yeah, so you know, there's a couple of things, and also we are talking to. Well, at the moment we've moved art gallery because we were commissioned by the director of the Museum of Art Design in New York just before COVID to do an exhibition. Anything we wanted. He said, "I love dazzle ships. Be as weird as you want. Just do an exhibition for my museum with
like media, visual, and sound, or like
audio visual."
video.
So
Okay.
audio visual. So we have, you know, COVID's come and messed things up, and then the new album stopped it and everything. We started talking 5 years ago to NASA about doing a thing based on the Cassini mission to Saturn. And they have opened their cupboards of all of their visuals and all of their computer graphics.
Holy moly.
And yeah, so I have a meeting next week with a very large museum in America with the working towards the idea of possibly putting this on. There's a lot of work to be done yet, but so there you go.
That's
So
exciting.
there's, you know, there's doesn't have to be a whole new OMD album, but there's still things in
Well,
the.
yeah, I get that. And I think that's why, and like there's nothing to, against Paul, I do enjoy him in the band and the music, but to me, I want to speak to you. It's always been a collective of you, because even when it was just you in the band, I still love the songs. It's always been about the direction of where you kind of lead it. And like I said, the tone of your voice that I don't know if you ever listen to a lot of OMD covers online, and I really haven't until recently for this. I'm like, they sound good, a
You
lot of them,
masochistic bastard.
but no one can get that voice tone because everyone can do the low guy voice, but they're always missing that inflection of your voice. That the way you could go up high like that, they're missing that little. It's a thing.
It sounds like I mean it.
It sounds very emotional. It's very emotional.
I mean, it's one of the things that I mean, you know, people are talking a lot these days about AI, and every piece of AI music I've heard sounds like a generic pastiche because it's just algorithms. It's pre-programmed and it
Yeah.
can't laterally or do anything that really means it. And so, you know, you see these things and you can see what the algorithms are. It's like, you know, mid-80s electro music about
Right.
robots. And you know, and some of it sounds like those really shit bands who I will not name, who really
You
were
don't
just
have to.
jumping on the electro bandwagon, and they're just singing like this, and they're trying to be robotic, and they think it's modern, and people are going to buy it, and it's just like, oh, fuck off, do something that's different, that's your own thing. We only started writing about electricity and airplanes and oil refineries, telephone boxes, and using electronic music because we wanted to be different, not because we were copying anything that we thought was going to make us any money, because we didn't think it was going to. Nobody was more surprised when we started selling records than we were ourselves.
But to me, one thing that I don't know if people get that enough. I think that the songs like we actually, it's funny because you sometimes you'll put the title. The first thing you'll think is the title of the song, which is usually a no-no in a song for a chorus. Usually, so you do that a lot. I really love that you do that. But also, the melody start with like will be a very simple keyboard line where people go, I could do that. I can't. I wonder how many Casio keyboards and big keyboards and chord figures were bought because they thought they could do similar type of music from you guys and the few of your peers that you grew up with. But that being said, it's so hard to write a simple song. Right. That's the part that everybody missed. I mean, it was great probably for Casio Company and all those guys selling the keyboards, but I don't think they got the point of how hard it is to do a simple song like that and do it right. You know,
It's no, I mean, for every person who can play Enola Gay, you know, you know, of which there are probably, you know, 100 million, you have to write it now. And I'll let you into a secret. I wrote that song at half speed. I can't really play keyboards very well, so I was doing a claw 3 note chord, da, 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 da,
Yeah.
I'm like, right, Paul, that's the melody. You play at full speed, okay? And so that's but it's, you know, I can remember giving there's a music school in Liverpool called Liverpool Institute of Performing Arts. It was
Right.
Paul McCartney's old school, and he helped create it. And I used to give lectures there. And I remember one day, one guy said to me, "How good a guitarist do I need to be to get a record contract? I've been playing since I was 4 years old, and I play for at least 5 hours a day." And I said, "Do you want to know the truth?" I said, "You're probably too good already, because you want to be a virtuoso.
Right.
Nobody cares other than other guitar players who go, how did you get so many fucking notes into the bar, man?" It's like, no, no, no. What people buy is the melody that your granny whistles at the bus stop that is
Yeah.
played on one finger. I said, if being a virtuoso guitarist meant you sold more records, Django Reinhardt would have outsold the Beatles, and he didn't.
That's a good point. And you see that a lot with record guitar solo guys that are great in sales and different, and how sometimes I love guitar. Believe me, I love guitar. I'm
I can
horrible at
see.
it. And I tell people sometimes I have like one of the best guitarists in the world on, and I'm like, we've got the best guitars and the worst guitars. We have the whole thing. But the truth is, you don't have to be anything. You just got to be original. And the fact that you said that, you come in, you wrote it at half speed, and you weren't doing that. You were coming into the song differently. You're kind of coming to it sideways. You weren't coming in, you know, trying to write the perfect song. This is what the Beatles wrote. This is what Stones wrote. Or whatever, you know what I'm saying, for
Yeah.
timeline. And then being like, this, and this is where I'm going. No, you're like, I'm coming in. I can't even play the keyboard or whatever time. I'm coming in sideways at this tempo. And that's how things are created. You know,
Yeah,
you're
well,
not copying, you're creating.
that's how we created them. I mean, the other thing as well is that, you know, we put together in our heads and in our own way a very specific collection of influences, because nobody works in a vacuum, okay? But
No.
you know, the melody idea came from Kraftwerk synth. You know, don't sing a chorus, the synth melody is the chorus.
Mm-hmm.
But we shortened their ideas. We took some of their conceptual ideas, but we didn't have the machines they had. We couldn't afford Moogs and sequencers, you know. So we had cheap drum machines. My second-hand bass guitar, which I bought with the money for my 16th birthday, which is a lefty, and I'm right-handed. So I learned with the strings upside down. And to this day, I still play with the E string at the bottom, even though my guitar is now right-handed. And when I give my bass to other people, it's so funny to see how it fucks their heads up. It's great. But so yeah,
Yeah, I got to think about that for a minute. That is pretty crazy.
yeah, the E is at the bottom because basically just took a lefty and turned it over.
Right.
So, but of course the problem was the pickup selector and the volume control was underneath my wrist when I was playing, so it was always a pain in the ass to play. So when it got stolen the first time I ever played in London with Joy Division, I bought a right-handed guitar because I realized by then that somebody could cut the nut and turn the strings over for me. So, but after 4 years, it was too late. I couldn't play normally. I had to play upside down. And actually, if you think about it, and this will mess with your head now. It's a lot easier to play because I often play chords and split octaves on my bass. It's
Right.
a lot easier to play a chord or a split octave because you're reaching up naturally like that. You're not having to pull
Yeah.
down. You're reaching up because you've got the G there and another G there, and it's actually a more natural guitar-shaped chord.
Yeah.
Joan of Arc and She's Leaving and several other. I actually at the end I'm just hitting an out, holding an A chord, just going. And killing the E with the flat of my palm, and playing three A's, two held and one open string. You know, it's just.
And I think that's a sound though. It's just kind of fascinating to know you could do it that way because the bass in the band,
Sorry,
obviously
I'm
being a
lying. It's
keyboard.
D, not A. What am I talking
No, 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 no. I'm saying, but it's interesting to have the tone and everything set that way because the bass also leads, you know, in the song differently. It holds differently in your music than a lot of other groups because there's no crazy guitar solos and stuff. It's the bass and the keys are the main instruments and your voice and melody.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the thing was, I mean, I tried guitar and it hurt my fingers. I wanted to be a drummer, but I couldn't afford a drum kit, so I bought the cheapest bass guitar they had in the shop. It was £32 in 1975, because it was a lefty. It was the cheapest one in the shop. It was the only one I could afford. So, but that's it. And Paul didn't even have anything. He cannibalized his auntie's radios for the circuits, and made these things that just made weird noises in it. And it wasn't until sort of 6 months later that he actually bought off a friend of mine at school. He bought a cheap Vox Jaguar organ and a Selmer pianotron, which actually plucked the strings like a harpsichord. It plucked these metal bars. It was almost like a kalimba, electric kalimba.
Yeah.
Keyboard attached, and that is the electricity, the sound of electricity, which we wrote when we were 16. Is my bass, Paul just holding those organ chords, and the plinky plonky piano, and we played 6 gigs without even owning a synthesizer. We used to borrow them off people.
That is insane, and to think that, from there you went to being one of the leading of synths of that time, and inspired so many bands to this day. Yeah.
Let me show you something. I've got it here. Well, knock everything over, and there we go. Can you see this?
Yes.
This is a Korg Micro preset. This is the first synthesizer we ever bought. This was £7.76 for a week for 36 weeks off my mother's mail order catalogue. It's a total piece of shit. It has all these presets that say, flute, oboe, horn, clarinet.
Bossa Nova, right?
Well, no, it doesn't have a drum machine, but no matter what button you press, it just goes. Eh.
Yep. That's hilarious, because if you look behind me, I have a keyboard similar. Obviously, it'd be newer than that one, with the presets. And my kids were teaching my dog to hit the keys for treats on the presets. I'll have to send you the video. It's hilarious. But you created something from nothing, and you started with a creative thing. And I think that's where it happened. So what I was curious with, because you grew up in technology, and then you did your own recording with, you guys broke up or took a break, however you want to call it. You did your own recording and songwriting for other people, but you were still writing and you still doing recording, which at that point you kind of grew up into recording, because brilliantly, I think one of the things you guys do, and you've talked about it, but I don't think people get it, that at that time you built your own studio. There's only a few of the musicians I can say that were so renegade and took the money back then, because now it makes sense. I mean, so Lorena McKicken, she was being a folk person. They gave her the money. First thing she did, she built a studio. That's punk rock, because you're a folk person, you're not gonna make any albums. You guys, same thing. I mean, and these were times when nobody's thinking like that. You make your studio.
We were budgeting for failure. If they're going to give us £30,000,
that should be on a shirt. That should be on the shirt. OMD, budgeting for failure. If that's not already on one of your shirts,
that should be the next album title. Maybe I will write.
That would be a good title.
I think the funny thing is, we just thought, we're going to go into a studio for a month, record an album, spend all the money, and all we'll have to show for it is a few 2-inch reels. We won't sell any records. I don't know why these people have given us a deal, but thank God they did. We will build our own studio, and then when we get dropped, we have a recording studio to write in.
And how old were you when that deal came through? You made that decision?
19.
Okay. Doesn't that sound like a 45-year-old man that's had a career and understands the ups and downs of the business? Like, looking back now, are you like, how did I think of that then? That's insane.
Well, do you know what the thing was? There was 3 of us, actually. There was myself and Paul Humphreys. And
right.
Paul's been younger than me. I think he might have actually been. No, he just turned 19 when we got offered the deal. Yeah. The guy he went to school with, who was my academic age, a year older than Paul, became our manager by default, because he was 18 at the time when we first did our first gig. He had a recording studio in his garage. He had Winston, the tape recorder that we went on to use on stage. He also worked for a TV rental company. Do you remember when people used to rent TVs? Are you that old? I don't know.
Oh yeah.
He used to drive around in a van. He worked for Vision Hire, so he was even better electronically than Paul Humphreys. He had a studio and he had a van, so he became our manager.
did everything, huh?
And so the three of us, two 19-year-olds and an 18-year-old, decided that, you know, when we finally signed our deal, when Paul had finally become 19, that we were going to build a studio. And Paul Humphreys and Paul Collister, who was our manager and then the TV engineer, they
Hmm.
built this studio from scratch at the age of like 19, 20.
That's
And
amazing to me. And me going to school and getting a degree in that, like in that documentary, I'm like, all right, stop talking about anything else now. I would love for you guys to like the documentary, like do like an hour deep dive. I would have liked to see pictures and just talk about that studio built back then with the raw tools, because that is so exciting to think about the creation of a band, the creation of a sound. You're building a sound as you build your studio. You're so young and with all these ideas, and you're finding your sound. That is
I mean,
just
it was amazing. Well, it was a wonderful opportunity. I think because Paul and I were a two-piece, and we'd always had to use tape recorders to, like, okay, well, we need to put the drums and the synth bass on the tape machine, and then we'll
right.
play on top of it, you know. And oh God, I mean, Paul's poor mother. I mean, we always worked at his house. No, we worked at his house because his mother was a widow, his brother was at uni, so he and I were the only ones there. And she was out 6 days a week working to keep the roof over his head because she was a widow. And so she, you know, we had a place to go where nobody could hear us, except for the one day when she was sick off
All right.
work. And we were working on the song Bunker Soldiers, and we had this tape that we had about 6 minutes of just the bass line, and we went bodies, we just for hour after hour, wind the tape back, starting, and finally by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, she just kept saying, knock knock knock. It's a lovely song, boys, but do you know any others?
Oh my God, bless her heart for taking it that long. I mean, that is so sweet, though.
So yeah, but it was, and I mean the other amazing thing was, because I was supposed to go to university and took a gap year. Paul got offered a job with whatever was the precursor of British Telecom to do an apprenticeship in London as a telecom engineer,
Wow.
and he turned it down. And he didn't tell his widowed mother, who was working 6 days a week, because she would have killed him,
Yeah, it makes sense.
because he wanted to stay around with me and write songs. And so we were both on the dole. We were both unemployed for a year, and just, we had enough money to buy that synthesizer and do gigs on factory records and play with Joy Division and Certain Ratio, and just about, hand to mouth. But his mother also had, which she then got framed after he told her when he was famous, his school report when he was 10 years old by Miss Clayton, his class teacher and music teacher. In the
Yeah.
section under music, Paul has absolutely no aptitude for music. And his mother got it framed, I think, and he's still got it. But yeah, he was the tech boy, and I was the kind of the idea arts guy, and it was a great combination.
It was a perfect storm, and I think that's why, and almost this episode of talking to you was like celebrating these things, and some of them might be redundant to some people. I'm hoping new fans are coming in, and I want people to feel the contagiousness of my excitement and these things that you guys have done and are doing, and it's so relevant now. I'm saying, but it's the consistency of your music that you've stayed true to it, and you've been open. I like when a band can take a left turn, even if the album stinks, because I can listen to your album if you don't play it live. Once you've already done the album, you can move on. So if a band does another album, so to me, like Dazzle Ship's actually a great album, but for a lot of people, they get stunned at the time. I'm like, you should do what you want to do. Now the commercial value of that as young men trying to pay bills and what it's like, I get it. You guys learned a lot with the commercial value at the
Well,
time
if,
and
if
bills.
if you don't sell enough records, your record company drop you. So
They are like that, yeah. The record
Mhm.
labels are like banks, is what they are. You just owe them money forever, and it's how it is. It's a shame. Do you think you had? What's interesting to me is you had legs on both sides of the fence when it comes to promoting and being in a band earlier on, and then you came back to a strong base. Two different time periods almost. Like it's almost probably like night and day. Like with media now, you can get on your phone. We're on our devices. You can do an interview. You don't have to leave your house. I would love it. That'd be tolerance for me because I wouldn't have to be around people. Do you think it's easier or better or just different to time periods for like not comparing like the success or the money part of growth, but just like as an artist because generationally you're getting both.
It's very, very different, very, very different. And the technology has changed the music industry completely, not just the way we listen to our music. I mean, if you think back, it was vinyl and cassettes when I started. Then it went to CDs. Then it went to downloading. Then it went to streaming. And since music has gone completely digital and most people access them, I mean, people still love to buy vinyl, and bless them.
I've got it a bunch at home in a nice stereo.
And they do sound great, but as soon as it started to as soon as music became just an icon on your laptop or in your phone, you could delete it, swipe it, dump it, send it to a friend, whatever. It just seemed to lose the value, because people wouldn't think of stealing something from a shop, but when it's just on your laptop or in your phone, do I have to pay 99 cents for this? I've already got it,
No, I get that.
Or I ripped it off YouTube or whatever, So it's and the music industry suffered for a long time because they panicked when Napster came out, and then they sold the family jewels far too cheaply to iTunes, and they've been basically behind the eight ball ever since. But when streaming came along, they bought into it, and they realized, well, hey, listen, we don't have to manufacture anything here now. We don't have, and also we can now tell video directors and photographers and recording studios that we don't have a £300,000 budget anymore. You're going to have to do it at mates rates, So, and if you had a studio, I mean, running a studio now is like the water gets higher and higher, the bills go up, but you can't charge any more because people just go, if I've got Pro Tools on my laptop, I'll buy a good mic and I'll do it in my bedroom. It's like...
Well, a lot of stuff you can, except for drums. I tell people, don't ever do drums in your house. Have a professional drum studio. I've got to say that enough to enough people. People just got to stop doing drums in their own drums, unless of course they're electronic, for your type of music. But like live drums, there are.
Yeah. And you've spoken like a recording studio.
I can't help it. Sorry, it just came out of me.
But for me, the biggest difference is though that. We were really lucky that there was a couple of nutty people in Manchester who started a small label called Factory, and they signed us because they had this mad idea that they wanted to be philanthropic. They wanted to sign local artists, say that, we are a record label, and we sign local artists. We made 5,000, we sold them, it paid the bills. We sent them out to all the majors. Somebody signed the artist. We got a cutback for it of an override or
right.
£10,000, and then we went to the next one. Now we were the only band on Factory that model actually worked for, because Peter Saville told me that was the model, and you were the only band where we signed you for one single and then we moved you on, and we got paid by the label who signed you. Everybody else stayed there for better or for worse, and then they sent it out. Dindis Records was a new label starting as a subsidiary of Virgin Records. Carol Wilson took a punt on us. She never saw us play live. She just came up and sat on Paul's mum's backroom sofa. We played all of our 8 songs, and the next time we saw her, she offered us a 7-album deal, and she missed the gig she came to, but she still gave us the deal.
That is bananas. And I heard that you guys tell that story. The first time I heard that, I always think, God, that is insane, because that would never happen. Anybody else?
Happen now? No, I mean, I stayed very, very good friends with my ex-manager, who sadly passed away last year, Martin Kirkup, who was still managing Katy Perry, and bless her, because they stuck with her through three album deals. She got dropped and dropped and dropped, and so when she hit it big, she stayed with them. All the sharks came coming in, but she stayed with them. And I remember having this conversation with Martin a couple of years ago, and he said, Andy, it's totally different now. If you want to get a record deal, you have to demonstrate to a major label that you've already lit a big enough fire to get on their radar.
Yeah.
And then maybe if they see your Bandcamp or your SoundCloud or your TikTok or your Facebook or whatever.
But that's you already doing it though. That's what do they say? It's a turnkey industry. They just want to buy your small business, right?
It's a bit like a big business buying up the small competitors.
Right.
They just come in. I'll have that, thank you.
That is so bad. That's even worse. That's worse now than it used to be.
You've developed the model. You've shown you've got an audience. We'll have that with because basically A&R men used to have a budget. They go, yeah, no, listen, there's so much fat on the bone. If we have somebody that sells 1 million records, then we can sign 5 others that break even or don't sell. But my ass is not on the line because I'm still making a profit for the label. Now, if you're the guy who signed a band and they didn't sell records, the managing director is going to call you into the office and go, "You've lost us $1 million. You're sacked." So you're fired. So it's just now they sit on their hands, or they go, well, hang on a minute, right? Let's do the focus group. Let's do the tick box, right? Who wrote the last number one? We'll get them to write a song for this artist. Who dressed them in the video? Who directed the video? Who produced it? Who produced the record? What studio is it done with? Who did the marketing? Who did the PR? Right? Get that tick all the way right. Well, listen, boss. I ticked all 8 boxes. It's not my fault. It wasn't a hit. Well, it wasn't a hit. It was like AI. It was generic algorithm fucking music.
I think it's just one thing I would just say. I add with I think people listen, young fans,
that's why
and
everything
musicians
sounds so generic and shit now.
Oh,
Sorry,
totally.
Now.
No. Well, I think that's the thing. I think it's important. It's actually a good conversation. That like my show at its size, I've never promoted it. I don't get paid by YouTube because I don't want to buy into it. It's out of pocket even for Zoom, and it's not an A on me. It's a passion of music, and I want to keep sharing all these conversations with these artists that I love and talk about things that aren't clickbait. But my point is, I don't have a huge Instagram because I don't want to. I don't put the time into that. I put the time into editing and working and getting it going. And artists don't have to get so crazy. You don't have to have a huge TikTok and all this Instagram. Focus on your music, and keep working grassroots. And you can still build it. And you know what? When you get it, if you keep it, your ownership of your songs to yourself, you'll probably make more money than you will for the record labels because most artists now that don't have the big record deals are making more money now.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can keep control of it and work hard and graft and nickel and dime it, and you can make a living. But it's only a very few people now.
Well, that's newer bands now, I'm saying, but with a band like you have a legacy. And I say legacy. I say legacy with a good thing, not like a shot and out legacy.
No,
you know what I'm saying?
We are fortunate. Yeah, we are fortunate.
So you can kind of get a benefit out of being who you are and the new benefit. But I'm saying a lot of artists now that can kind of mom and pop it. You get to the point where a label wants you. You can say no, thank you, because you're at that point that you got it. It's just how to sign distributing deals and stuff. I mean,
well, what are you going to do for us that we're not already doing ourselves?
Exactly.
For the money you're going to take off us.
Most artists have started websites. Dusel's App started a website for other artists to come sign on to, that they get their money and it's controlled for them to get paid. But you know what I'm saying? It's all built for artists. Steve Vai did something where he bought and did distribute his own music. That's how you do it.
But you have to learn to be more than just a musician. You have to you do have to do your own marketing. You do have to do your own your own internet, your own social media. You have to play a very different game. We were just really lucky. Some nutters in Liverpool had a fantastic sub-basement club called Eric's, which had an open night on Thursday, and anybody would go and play. And all the bands from my generation played their first gig at Eric's on a Thursday night.
Please share with everybody. I don't think anybody could understand how awesome this was. Tell people that aren't aware of the story. Like, who played with you at that place? It's amazing.
Well, Eric's club is diagonally across the road on Matthew Street from the Cavern. And the Cavern was also a sub-basement. So I assume that the Cavern had the same problem as Eric's. It was in the old Liverpool pool. So it's very low. So whenever it rained heavily and the tide was in, the toilets overflowed. Not, however, they would let people play in there on a Thursday night. And my generation of musicians, let me see if I can remember the one. Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark, Echo and the Bunnymen, Teardrop Explodes, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Flock of Seagulls, The Mighty War, China Crisis. I know I've left them, but there we go. That's just the ones I can remember.
That's amazing. And I'm going to say I was probably the naughty version of Frankie Goes to Hollywood, not the PG version we saw later on in life. It's the younger Frankie, which is much more naughtier.
They were all in different bands. I mean, actually, what's interesting was the biggest band in Eric's was a band that never went on to be successful. However, they were a supergroup in reverse. The only one who really didn't become a professional, famous singer was Jane Casey, who was the lead singer. They had 2 drummers. They had Enrico Cadillac Jr., who was Steve Allen, who went on to become a head A&R man at Warner Brothers. Then they had Budgie, who played with Susie and the Banshees and on the Slits first album. He was the main drummer.
Oh.
On bass, they had Holly Johnson, who was replaced by Dave Balfe, who started Zoo Records, who signed the Bunnymen and the Teardrops, and then created Food Records, and is the man who lives in a very big house in the country because he signed Blur and made them make a pop album for their second album, which they hated him for, but it made their career. He was on bass. Rhythm guitarist was Bill Drummond, the KLF, and the lead guitarist was Ian Brody, who was the record producer for the Bunnymen and the Teardrops, and went on to be the Lightning Seeds and wrote 3 lines on a shirt.
That is amazing. That is, I mean, that is such a small collective. That's
incredible. And we were all allowed to play in a name club because it was on the circuit. You know, we never got paid, for free on a Thursday night. I mean, we played there I think on the 4th time, Roger Eagle gave us 6 beers free, and we were like, we've made it. Roger Eagle was one of the guys who was the promoter there. So, yeah, it was, but yeah, it was an absolute, I mean, it reopened, and health and safety meant that they could only put 300 people in there. It had a capacity of 800, and it was. I remember seeing Devo in there, their first ever gig in England, and we knew there was another stage in the back corner, so we'd arrived late. Fuck this, we can't see anything because the ceiling was so low. The stage was only 15 inches high because it was any higher
off the ground.
Yeah, only 15 inches above the crowd. And
what was the ceiling too? What was the ceiling rate on that? Like probably what, 9 feet or something?
Yeah, the ceiling was probably less than, probably like 8.5.
Oh my God!
There were 2 beams and there were par lamps hanging on the stage. So if you went any high, or if you were tall, you just banged your
bang your head.
Yeah. So it was, but it was an absolute dump. But it was our place, and I mean the bands that came there, you know, I mean, and I used to go and say, sort of the Cure, XTC. Obviously, we did gigs with Joy Division and the Bunnymen and the Teardrops. Saw Per Ubu played there all the time. You know, it was incredible. All these really cool bands used to play, and all the bands of my generation.
Right.
Because this is the other interesting thing, was for a brief moment in time, punk detonated the music industry in England. And it was provincial. So all of the A&R men had to get off their fat asses in London, get on the train or go in the car and drive all around the country to all these provincial new wave and punk clubs who all had the best bands. All of the great bands of my generation, and I'm now talking 78, 79, all of the bands of my generation did not come from London. They all came from Dublin and Belfast or Derry, Manchester, Liverpool, Sheffield, Birmingham, Bristol, Glasgow, you know, Newcastle. Or nobody came from London. It was all provincial clubs who opened their doors. Most of them went bust within 18 months, but you know, they all had these little places that it was like, if you build it, we will come.
It's an amazing part of history. I mean, it's excellent. I mean, that's what allowed it. I mean, those are the steps, and I think that situation. I mean, everything you mentioned were like such special moments that allowed you to get to where you were. You know, people can say, well, you get in music business, if you're talented, you'll succeed. Maybe. You just got to think because you're lucky. You maybe get an album, but to get an album and have a career, you're talented and maybe lucky. To get the spot, when you're lucky, you got to be able to deliver the goods. You got to have everything lined up. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things involved for a band to have success. And someone like you, where you've had the talent and the ingenuity, and you kept going, even when you guys had the big splinter in the band, and you took some time off, you guys took a huge break. A lot of bands can't take like 20 years off and come back. You know, most relationships can't do that. It's like being your high school sweetheart. We dated in kindergarten. Now we're going out again. It's amazing.
It would be better if you took a 17-year break, actually.
I'll be honest, yeah, probably. As I say that out loud, you're right.
I had a running battle with the record company because I wanted.
That's another thing. I'm like, I can't believe that one. That's
both Joan of Arc. I wanted to call them both Joan of Arc, and they said no. And I said no. This is the whole point. We're trying to, we're trying to do something nuts here. Let's do it, And in the end, they won, and they said, listen, nobody will buy another song called Joan of Arc because they think they've already got it. So one was Joan of Arc, and the other was Maid of Orleans, the Waltz Joan of Arc. But no, I mean, listen, nobody else would write a song when they were 16 about electricity. Nobody else would write a song about Enola Gay. But other people do their own things, you know? I mean, and one of the things I loved about Kraftwerk is because they did something different. I love Joy Division because they did something different. You know, I love David Bowie and Roxy Music. When I was a kid, I was a teenager, there was literally on one hand I could count who I loved. You know, it was like Velvet Underground, Bowie, Roxy Eno, Kraftwerk, and Neu, and everything else was shit as far as I was concerned. I had my narrow window, and that was my sphere of influence.
It's done well for you though. I'm sure it's opened up more. Who would you say now that you like that people go, really? Like, is there a band that someone would go, like you say, you know who I like? And your fans would be like, I wasn't expecting that. Like, who would you say maybe?
Um, there's a few. I mean, I've been a fan of the XX. I love Robin, Swedish singer.
Mhm.
Hot Chip. I like. Oh God.
Not that I'm putting you in the spot, right?
No, no, no. I mean, I will be honest. I struggle to find new music that I like because a lot of it I just doesn't consistently talk to me. Oh, Nation of Language.
Okay.
New American band. So some of our support bands are brilliant. I mean, there's a brilliant new Scottish band called Walt Disco who will be supporting us on our North American tour, and they supported us last year in Europe and the UK. They're amazing.
When is this North American tour coming? Soon?
We had to postpone it last year because I had problems, and so did Paul's family actually. So we're coming back at the end of May. In fact, we're actually playing the Cruel World Festival in LA at the middle of May. Then we come over and we start on the East Coast in Washington, and yeah, we're all end of May, all through June and early July. Thank you very much. Have a
Thank you.
good day over there, and
Thank you. You
bye
you
now.
take care. Bye bye.
Bye.